Last week, the new British Prime Minister declared that part of keeping Britain great, as well as leaving the European Union, was for the United Kingdom to adopt an Australian-style immigration system. But just because our system has worked better than Britain's, and look, to be honest, it wouldn't be that hard with the free-for-all that is migration since they joined the EU, it doesn't mean that our own system can't be improved. As you know, sustained record levels of immigration at close to 250,000 newcomers every year are putting downward pressure on wages, upward pressure on housing costs. It's clogging our roads and public transport and risks us losing the quality of life that so many have moved to Australia for in the first place. Too many of our so-called skilled permanent migrants have credentials that aren't recognised here. Too many of our overseas students are looking for residency, not a degree, and too many of our short-term skilled workers are doing jobs that Australians can and should be trained for. By all means, if you can come here for a real job, pay taxes and join the team from day one, you're going to make a fine contribution to our country. But that's not the whole picture of Australia's immigration program, and Boris Johnson should do his homework before he seeks to copy it all holus bolus. A little later on in the show tonight, I'll be talking to Dr. Bob Birrell, a former Monash University academic who now heads the Australian Population Research Institute. He says that Australia's rules for partner visas are the weakest in the world and that too many relationships are essentially contrived or manufactured to gain permanent residency. We should take note here because over a quarter of all our permanent migration places are taken up by these spousal visas. And because we don't require people to have a job or even English language skills to get a spousal visa, unlike almost all other categories of our visa system, it's ripe for rorts. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're an Australian citizen and you marry a foreigner, of course, your spouse should be entitled to live here. But do we do enough in terms of due diligence? What if you've only just yourself obtained Australian residency? Should people who've hardly been here 5 minutes be allowed to bring a spouse from overseas to permanently live in Australia? And what about relationships that don't last? Should someone be able to keep permanent residency in Australia just because of a one-time short relationship with someone who themselves just happen to be a citizen? How long does it take for a relationship to be genuine? If it hits the rocks, was that pre-arranged, the end of the sham, or was it just bad luck, and how on earth can we tell? These are important questions we need to sort out if our system is to have the integrity that makes it worth emulating. In recent years, says Dr. Birrell, somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000 partner visas have been issued annually. It would have been much higher given the backlog of almost 80,000 applications, but for the fact that Peter Dutton has led a crackdown. Now, the fact that he has and it's now down to 40,000 suggests to me that for some time there may have been too many bogus applications. Not one for just highlighting the problem, Dr. Birrell has put up some suggestions to lessen the risk of rorts. He wants to see the age of sponsors increased up to 21 years. He wants to ban welfare for partner visa holders for 4 years. And he wants proof required that couples are in a genuine and continuing relationship before they get their visa. And he suggests the authorities need to go back and check just how real the relationship is 2 years on. As someone who's worked in the immigration portfolio way back in the 1990s, I think what he suggests makes a lot of sense. Dr. Birrell also says that recent residents should not be able to so readily return to their former country to bring back a bride. And I'll explain why in just a moment. Of course, the last thing anyone wants is to make decent Australians feel like strangers in their own country just because they weren't born here. But we owe it to everyone who is an Australian already, whether native-born or immigrant, to keep our country's security, our prosperous way of life, our border controls and our character. It's often said that to live in Australia is to have won the lottery of life, and that's very true. But we can't keep opening the doors ever wider and expect that to remain the case. Immigration needs to come down, not drastically, not overnight, but it must come down substantially over time to the sorts of numbers common in the Howard era. And the best way to make a start is to make the rules much less easy to manipulate. Voters on the left and on the right, well, they're in complete agreement. They want immigration reformed, and it's about time that politicians started to listen.